Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first ever live Blueshirt Bandwidth. I'm your host, Joe Fortunato, joined as always by my co-host, Eric Cohn. It is Cinco de Mayo. It is the 84th episode, I believe. I don't really think we're going to even do housekeeping right now because we're doing a live stream for the NHL draft.
Lottery.
None of you know that lottery, sorry. None of you know that this is happening. We're doing this literally live. We're kind of doing a test phase. You may be watching this right now. And if you are, we love you. We appreciate you. It's popped up on your feed. We are going to be, you actually get a full episode, 2 days before it actually goes live, really 1 day before it goes live. So let me give you a quick update of what's going to happen here. It is 7:04 p.m. Eric and I are going to do a live, reaction to the draft lottery. We are going to discuss how the draft lottery came out one way or another for the New York Rangers until about 7:45. Blueshirt Banter Hartford expert Keegan Jarvis will be joining us from 7:45 to probably 8:45. There's a lot of shit to talk about with him. And if you're not watching this live, you are listening to this or watching it theoretically on Thursday as normally would be. So
we could do one bit of housekeeping.
Sure.
This is the 83rd episode of the
83rd?
podcast. There is no Ranger who has worn number 83.
Right, last week was Straka, so there you go.
Yeah, last week, yes. And yeah, there's no 83. So this is an unnamed player to be named later. Player to be taken with the first round draft pick of the New York Rangers episode of Blueshirt Bandwidth.
Maybe Gavin McKenna.
It may be the Gavin McKenna episode.
83.
It may be the Igor Shesterkin episode.
It
may be the Caleb Malhotra episode. We don't know.
Could be many
We will
things.
find out. We will.
So
we may find out. We have a better idea after today for sure.
For sure. So we are going to do the next. I don't know when the draft lottery actually begins. Oh, that's interesting. ESPN
it's like we're doing conversations right now.
Yes. So let's talk about a couple of things here.
Yes.
Eric and I were talking about this a bit before. From our vantage point, and things have changed a bit since we've spoken to Scott Wheeler, it certainly feels like Gavin McKenna, it remains the first overall. I shouldn't even say it certainly feels like. Gavin McKenna remains the first overall pick by a wide margin. Ivar Stenberg is very clearly the second overall pick. There has been some juggling of where players have fallen from that point forward. So Chase Reed seems to have stepped up into that third overall. Eaton Verhoff sitting at fourth. Caleb Malhotra, everyone is now expecting to sort of make a jump. Eric and I were talking in the green room a little bit before we came onto the show. We have always felt that the first and second overall matters the most because those are the two tier one prospects that are in this year's draft. However, it feels like if you want Caleb Malhotra, the Rangers need to stick at third overall. Now, that's a problem for the New York Rangers. I don't know if you guys read the article that I wrote about this in my musings. The Rangers, I don't understand how this works fully. The lowest odds the Rangers have, they can go as high as first overall, 100%. They can fall as low as fifth overall. They can't fall any worse than that at 29.8%. The lowest odds the New York Rangers have is to stay at the third overall position that they currently reside in with their lottery odds at a 7.8% chance. Their highest odds are to fall to fourth, 39.7% chance. Second is 11.2%. So there is a 22.7% chance that the New York Rangers pick first or second overall. There is a roughly 70% chance that the New York Rangers pick fourth or fifth. If you're the New York Rangers, and it has been widely reported that they're very high on Caleb Malhotra, you don't want to fall fourth or fifth. Probably feels like he may not be there.
Possibly. Chris Feldman did publish a draft primer, a draft lottery primer. We got up on the site about an hour ago. By his lights, here are your top five. Gavin McKenna, Stenberg, Keaton Verhoff, Carson Karls, Caleb Malhotra. So, at least according to Chris, I know, look, definitely there is movement on Caleb Malhotra. Maybe he moves up into that fourth spot, but there's a decent possibility that he could still be there at fourth. Maybe not at fifth. It really, I think, at that point depends on what the team's primary need is. If you are a team that is loaded up on defense, then maybe you're not looking at Verhoff or Karls. Maybe you're looking at Malhotra. But if you really need defense, then maybe you're taking one of those guys in the third or fourth spot. So it's just really hard to say because, again, I looked at Scott Wheeler's stuff this morning, and like there's two guys, right? There's McKenna and Stenberg in tier 1, and then there's a bunch of players in tier 2. So it really could go in just about any order. And even as Chris pointed out in this piece, despite what everybody thought the third overall pick, I think, was going to be last year, it ended up being Beckett Seneke to Anaheim, who's having a hell of a season with the Anaheim Ducks. So you just really know if somebody's going to start to reach and if they're going to grab a player you weren't expecting.
You don't really know if somebody's going to reach. Yeah,
it looks like we have lottery balls up here on the television.
Are we?
So I don't
know they're happening.
Yeah, looks like they're dropping lottery balls into.
Oh, I'm witnessing this now. That's John Buccigross right there, right?
So that is John Buccigross, yes.
Here's the other thing, just to put this into perspective for all of you. What you do not want to see if you are a New York Rangers fan is for one of the teams that is being drafted or one of the teams that are behind the Rangers in draft odds to jump up. So if the team that can theoretically pick 15th overall jumps up, their lottery balls are selected, that means that comes out of the pool for one of the top 3 teams. So just keep that in mind. You want to see the team right now. If you go down the draft board, I'm going to flop right over here to Tankathon. Washington is the team that has the lowest odds. They have a 1.1% chance of getting the 6th overall pick. That's as high as they can go. Let's realistically talk about St. Louis at 11. The Devils have a 5% chance at 2nd overall. If you don't see the Devils fall at 12th, because that's where they're slotted right now, that means they've moved up in the draft lottery. The first team that can actually get to 1st overall is St. Louis with a 3% chance at 11. So those are the places that you want to make sure you don't want to see other, names drop in here. You want it to stay in the order that it's in as far down the line as you can go until hopefully the New York Rangers are the ones that jump up first. But we'll see if that actually ends up happening, obviously.
For what it is worth, going back here to Chris's piece, which is really good, I recommend you read it, even though many of you will be reading it after the lottery is done. With the 3rd overall pick, these are in order, according to Chris, the top 5 prospects he would like to see the Rangers draft if they end up in that 3rd overall spot. 1, Caleb Malhotra. 2, Carson Karls. 3, Vigo Bjork. 4, Albert Smits. And then 5, Chase Reed or Keaton Verhoff. Now, I do believe that is a bit informed by the Rangers' needs. And his point is a good one, too, which is the Rangers need defense and they need centers. If you really do believe in Caleb Malhotra, and I got to tell you, Joe, from some of the highlights that I have seen, like I'm also kind of getting it feels very uncomfortable getting excited about somebody named Malhotra possibly joining the Rangers for obvious reasons. Like it is triggering some PTSD Vietnam-like flashbacks. But boy, does he look good. And
he's doing the classic. This is what led the Rangers to draft Vitaly Kravtsov, by the way, which is not going to make you feel any better about what you just said. Kravtsov had a ridiculous, record-setting playoffs in the KHL in his draft year. Malhotra came alive in the playoffs. NHL executives love that. Absolutely love when that happens. So nothing rockets you up the draft board faster than that being the case.
Looks like there are drawings happening here. So
you may be ahead of me. I'm seeing time to next ball at 4 seconds.
I've got
0.
a countdown.
So who's getting popped up here? Which is the number 7. This is, by the way, this is riveting if you're not watching this on the live stream.
This is great podcasting, yes.
The best podcasting.
All right, Rangers. Looks like they're
the Rangers somehow gained
slightly improved. Yes,
slightly improved with the 7. They have an 11.9% chance at the 1st overall pick. Oh, this is how they do it. Interesting.
Yeah, okay. They draw the numbers.
Yes, I like this.
There's a cheat sheet out there that I've seen, and you can look that up to see what the combinations will create a Rangers 1st overall pick. But the Rangers still remain, although Vancouver is up to almost 20% now. Odds. All right, we've got another ball coming here.
2.
This one is a 2. Let's see what that
Rangers
does.
jump up a little bit more.
Rangers at
Rangers now have a
13.6%.
13.6%. Seattle's at 18.2. That's kind of wild.
That's bonkers. All right. Now we're
Don't
waiting
like
on the
that.
third lottery ball.
I think my heart rate is 140 beats a second, or beats a minute right now, just to be clear.
I should. I'm a 90. At least that's what my Apple Watch says here. We are
3 seconds
down
to the next
to
ball.
the third.
This is for the actual first overall pick, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I think this is correct. Again, I've not been listening because we have been talking. We have number 1. Let's see what that does.
Rangers jump
11,
up to 18.2.
Vancouver at 27.3%. Rangers at 18.2. They are the two with the best odds. How you feeling, Joe?
I'm freaking out, Eric.
Do you remember the Lafreniere?
I do. I was in my car. And my wife called me. Oh, Chris Drury is on the screen, ladies and gentlemen. He's got cute little glasses on. Is that Chris Drury?
Up in the right-hand corner, yeah. Top right-hand corner of the screen, yes.
Oh, my God. Final ball needed to win. Okay, the Rangers have a 9 or a 14 they need.
Mm-hmm.
Vancouver has a 1, 5, or 13.
9 or 14, 1, 5, or 13.
San Jose should not be permitted to win the lottery.
Absolutely should not be permitted to win the lottery. It should not. 9 or 14 is what you are looking for if you are a New York Ranger fan. All right, can we get to this drawing? 15 seconds? Are we going to do it?
My stomach actually hurts. Good. We've gone to like half and half.
Are we going to Pepto-Bismol? We're going to need some Pepto-Bismol here?
No. I should have taken it before.
Yeah. Yes, we are now running a commercial while we're watching ping pong balls bounce around. This is very riveting television. And it looks like John Buchacross has stepped in front of the screen. Also, great broadcasting here from ESPN. That's good stuff. All right. I guess we have to wait till the end of this commercial before we can actually.
I don't know if you're ahead of me or not. Is the
problem. I think I am like a second or two behind you. The
Let
good
me know
news
when
is
Stephen A. Smith is off your screen.
He's walking and standing in the middle of the screen now. Talking about CarShield. Do you have CarShield, Joe?
I do not. My insurance company actually covers my windshield if it breaks.
Well, CarShield is just a car insurance policy. It's.
Oh, I thought I don't know why I thought it was for.
I think you're thinking of like a windshield. Like I can't remember the name of the company that does. Yeah,
that is literally what I'm thinking of.
Basically, CarShield is if you want an extended warranty for your car, if you want regular repairs to be covered. Looks like Stephen A. Smith is off the screen now. We're to another commercial.
We've gone to another commercial. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. I think my heart rate may be 170 beats a minute.
You're gonna hyperventilate here live on this broadcast.
Just telling you. Yes. Who would even be able to help me is really the question here.
Was it 9 or 13? Is what we're. It
was 9 and 14.
14.
9 and 14.
All right. Here we go. Looks like we are coming back. Drury looks as excited as he always is. I got to tell you. 9 and 14 are the numbers that you are looking for.
9 is a pretty legendary number for the New York Rangers, to be clear.
Indeed. 1, 5, or 13 for Vancouver. Boy. Well, we're going to start the countdown,
10 seconds until the next ball.
All right. Here we go.
I don't even know if I can watch.
You are a couple seconds ahead of me. If you don't want to watch, look away, and I will tell you.
Well, no, I'm watching.
All right.
12. Toronto wins the lottery.
Wow.
So Toronto deserves this after everything that's
Leafs.
happened. Yes, they deserve McKenna. This is ridiculous. That's Matt Sundin, right?
That is Matt Sundin. Yes, we will talk about Toronto for sure.
Yes, we will have a conversation about Toronto. Okay, so
yes, first overall pick, the Gavin McKenna sweeps, or is that the case?
Yes, it is. Toronto wins the draft lottery.
Toronto is first overall. Wow. Wow.
So that played out about as well as it. So now this is where this becomes a problem, by the way, because that 5 slot is now open for the Rangers to fall into.
Yes, they can fall that far because they can get jumped.
If Toronto would not have won, it would have helped keep the Rangers at least 4, but okay. I guess we're going to have to wait for the next sequence of events to occur. So, like,
So,
I'll
Joe,
tell
how many
you,
seasons before the Toronto Maple Leafs successfully run Gavin McKenna out of town too?
well, we'll see how quickly it goes for Austin Matthews. I will say the press conference while we're here with Toronto, the press conference of the, is it Chuck? How do you pronounce his
Chayka?
name?
I think it's Chayka.
Chayka, like was some of the best theater. Listen, I am not a Steve Simmons guy by any means at all, but just absolute theater. For you know what? By the way, fuck this. Actually, this also has feelings of like rigged bullshit. Now that I'm thinking about this, like everything that just happened with Toronto, and now they win the draft lottery. This is bullshit. I don't like this. I don't like the way this looks or feels.
Can we go back to Simmons for a moment?
Yeah, sorry. I apologize. I just had a little outburst there because I'm pissed.
I agree with you. It was incredible theater. I think, and I understand because it is Steve Simmons, why he didn't do this. There was absolutely a way to ask that question and not come off like an epic asshole, which is what he did. I think given Chayka's record with the Arizona Coyotes, perfectly fair to ask about that history. The other thing that I thought was weird, though, was like directing the question to Pelly and not to Chayka himself. That's kind of like a bullshit coward move in my book. Like the guy is right there. It's not like he's one-on-one with Pelly and he's asking him about that. But maybe you lead with asking Chayka a question about his record and let him answer it in that sense. And other people, to be fair, did ask Chayka somewhat about his record, but that just came off to me as very weird. I think there was just a less asshole-ish way for them to do that, for Steve Simmons to do that, than he actually did. But there's some fairness to the thrust of the question. Chayka certainly fucked up when he was with the Arizona Coyotes. His record there is not good. He was also, I think, 26 when he got that job, which is also insane.
Yeah, I understand the question about his selection into this role after everything that happened in Arizona. He certainly seemed more inclined to blame the Arizona Coyotes situation than anything else. I will tell you that I am shocked that he got this position. Also, Matt Sundin, like just being along for the ride was kind of crazy. I also think it's telling that Matt Sundin was the one that was representing the Toronto Maple Leafs right here. So interesting. I just don't know. I think someone and I don't remember who it was in The Athletic asked this question of like, shouldn't the Maple Leafs be kind of concerned about who he's going to be able to hire, what players are going to want to come here after everything that happened in Arizona? The NHL is a very small, big business, and this is just something that does not make sense from a relationship perspective. And in the world of like retreads, right, that we deal with all the time and that we talk about all the time, this is a pretty wild move by Toronto. And,
It's more wild just because it's Toronto, right? Like I would expect, it's not that I would never expect Chayka to get another opportunity because, again, to your point about retreads, I think it's wild because it's Toronto. Like this, given all that's going on with the Toronto Maple Leafs, is who they're turning to, is kind of fascinating. The thing that gave me pause about the Steve Simmons stuff is the kind of dinosaurs that I'm sure are answering phone calls from Steve Simmons, I have no doubt, didn't like Chayka when he was immediately hired by the Arizona Coyotes, because anybody younger than them who might do things slightly different than the old boys club way that they do things is probably not going to be well received. Now, that may be an entirely justified opinion about Chayka himself. But it's also the kind of opinion that I would expect the kind of people who answer phone calls from Steve Simmons to say about anybody younger who thinks about things differently than they do. So take that for what you will. If you think it's worth nothing, that's fine. I don't really care. But I some of this definitely is biased by the fact that I cannot stand Simmons. I have never been able to stand Simmons. I also think
this draft lottery was rigged beyond belief, just for the record. Okay, so here's a major...
Ron to the second draw.
Here's a major issue for the Rangers. The Rangers cannot stay at third overall, from what I can gather. So they are either getting second, fourth, or fifth, and 4 and 5 are bigger numbers than 2.
I think they can stay at third.
So I'm seeing people report that is not the case. Oh, maybe
Keegan,
I'm wrong.
Who will be joining us.
I'll be Charlie.
Keegan, who is will be joining us in a bit here, says Rangers can pick anywhere between 2nd and 5th.
Yeah, I don't. Okay, well, I guess we'll go with Keegan then.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, we have to trust our own
out.
boy. We have to trust our guy. So there you go. Okay, first lottery ball is 11. It's a good number for the Rangers in history. Not a good number here. They fall down to 10.5%. This is fucking bullshit. I hate this so much. This is not going to end well for the Rangers, unfortunately.
Oh,
I was so
I am seeing the people saying that they cannot stay at 3rd now, which is interesting. Again, this is such a
it would be like easier if they made this a little bit like, why can't you just put a bunch of lottery balls in with different teams and just have it come up that way? Okay, the Rangers now, they've jumped up to 13.6. Okay. So there's that at the very least. We have that going for us.
I agree with you. I can't believe it's Toronto. Like, just
why is Toronto back up here again? Out of curiosity,
huh?
Right? Am I crazy?
Do they have multiple picks in the first round?
I don't know.
Do they have
they're not. There's no way they're permitted to win first and second. I mean, they can obviously, but
I
don't know why they're there unless they're.
That would be some insane bullshit.
Maybe their pick, if they win, swaps. Oh, so the Rangers. Oh, Toronto. How is Toronto?
They must have another first round pick here.
No, I think it's their odds. Maybe.
No, it's the one that they. It's the one that they have from Boston. Or is it the one that's going to Boston? I think it's if it's below. Is it so? There's a pick that they sent to Boston for Brandon Carlo. So I wonder if it's a top 5. It's top 5.
But isn't it protected?
I believe. I think it's top 5 protected.
All right, so the Rangers need a 1 and a 13. 1 is also a good number for the New York Rangers. Always feels great when it's like.
Yeah, so I guess if it's top 5 protected, then that pick would stay with them. So I guess they acquired another pick. I guess I can go to while we're doing this.
So Toronto. Oh no, 7. I'm sorry. So
7.
San Jose, cool. They get 2nd overall. That's awesome. All right, so this has played out pretty horrendously for the Rangers as expected. So the Rangers will probably be picking 5th.
Let's go to Toronto while we're waiting here.
Just to see what the deal is. All right, so the Rangers are fucked. Everything is bad. All right. So the Rangers can't stay at 3rd. Yep. So Vancouver moves to 3rd. So now the Rangers are picking 4th or 5th overall. Ping pong balls just did not bounce their way.
They did not.
And it has put them in the dreaded. I mean, I have serious thoughts that Malhotra is going to go 3rd overall. I just can't shake that.
Yeah,
I'm just telling you.
I don't
you how I feel.
I'm telling you, I hear that's how you feel. I don't know that I buy that. I just think that there have been too many defensemen who have been ranked too high over time to think that all of them are going to fall and Malhotra is going to rise that much. So I think 4th or 5th is probably still plausible that it's there.
All right, so the Ranger, we have to listen to Mike Greer now. Listening to this at all, actually. All right, so let's talk about fallout here. The Rangers don't get one of the 2 needle movers in the draft. Let me ask you a crazy question, Eric. Let's go out into the future. Let's say the Rangers get 4th or 5th, whatever. Malhotra's off the board by the time they select. Do you trade the pick to try to get more capital?
Would I do it?
Yes. What would you do in the circumstances? Obviously, this is all hypothetical. There's no one on the draft board,
I am. I think we talked about this last week. I'm not opposed to trading down. Now, that's the ought. The is they're not going to do that. So
yeah, sure. This is just you or I talking right now.
Yeah, I think there's a plausible argument for it, but I also think that like the Rangers need defensemen, and you're going to have.
Is this how it shook out?
Yep, 5th overall.
Okay, yeah, okay, exactly. The worst way that it could have fallen for the New York Rangers is how it falls. Cool.
Yep.
Great. Appreciate that. Now, I mean, now
Well,
do
that
you
was
think
fun.
Malhotra's on the board at 5th?
Maybe. Again,
I hate
like
that answer so much for you.
I think you are. I think you've been spending a little too much time reading Twitter
Dude,
and
I'm
not actually
doom
thinking
scrolling,
of
baby.
how.
Let's go.
I'm sure you are. But you're not actually thinking the way that NHL general managers are thinking. And I just don't know that he's going to rise that much, especially when you have had so many of those defensemen ranked in the like 3rd, 4th, and even 5th place for so long this season. And again, part of it is also going to be affected by what those teams need. You know, Vancouver
So
needs fucking everything.
yeah,
The Blackhawks, more of a
Vancouver's
wild
not.
card.
Yeah, like here's the deal. So if you look at what a mock draft would look like right now, obviously McKenna is going to Toronto. Stenberg is going to San Jose. Just an embarrassment of riches for San Jose. They're going to be so good for so long. Vancouver does get a little wonky. You're right. I don't trust Vancouver to necessarily do anything correct.
Well, yeah, for two reasons, right? Because they need everything. They need
Chicago
everything,
might
and
need
they're
defense,
insane.
to be honest with you. The outside of like where I don't know what the Rangers think their needs are. I think the Rangers think they need a forward rather than a defenseman. And I do wonder if the way the board shakes out, like my gut is telling me, I actually was going to say, I think Trocheck is probably gone at the draft. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I just think it went exactly how everything does for the Rangers. It is the worst case scenario. They're drafting 5th overall. You're watching the board to see what Vancouver or Chicago does. Look, there, to your point, Eric, there's always an instance where somebody jumps up and, somebody makes a pick that nobody would expect, but I think you're
overselling it. Like, I understand what you're saying in terms of like it worst case scenario, right? Worst case in the sense that
case scenario.
Well, worst case in the sense that 5th is the furthest that they could fall.
Yes, correct. That's what I mean. It's the worst case scenario.
Yes.
It could not.
And if
the
you let me
draft lottery
fucking
could not
finish
have
my
gone worse for the
sentence,
Rangers.
if you let me fucking finish my sentence and shut your fucking yapper. Again, go back to your boy Scott Wheeler's rankings. You have 2 players in tier 2, and you have a whole smattering of players, or in tier 1, and a whole smattering of players in tier 2. So yes, you're going to have 2 other teams with a bite at the apple, but for players who are, again, according to him, largely equivalent. So how big of a difference is it other than you have 2 teams picking ahead of you? So maybe a player that you like slightly better or slightly better than one of the others is going to be gone. It's not nightmarish. It's like, it's not as if they dropped to 10th, right? It's not as if they're falling so far back that you're now talking about a tier 3 level player. The highest likelihood was that they were going to be selecting a tier 2 player. It's just now they're selecting it at 5th overall. So I agree with you. It's worst case scenario in the sense that this is the furthest that they could fall. But there's a whole bunch of players available in that second tier that would fit needs that the Rangers have that theoretically, at least, again, you never know, are not bad players. So I think maybe we should tamp it down just a bit.
If I can now make my statement. Worst case scenario, meaning exactly like you said, the worst they could have picked was 5th. They are picking 5th. I think I said this on the last podcast. Somebody that I spoke to that I respect a lot in terms of prospects basically said there's going to be a lot of good players in the first round of this year's draft. They just don't know who they're going to be. And outside, to your point, outside of McKenna and Stenberg, it really could be anywhere there, which is where some of this, like, if you're picking 5th overall and you have a couple of guys very high up on your draft board, again, I'm projecting that Malhotra is one of them. If Malhotra is taken, should Chris Drury then look to see if he can't garner more draft capital in the draft or whatever, just to see what he can do? Now, the other thing I'd like to amend, and this might have been in a Charlie, I don't know if we're doing the Ombudsman report, probably better to not at this point. The best the Rangers draft pick can be from Dallas is 23rd overall. I'd just like to amend that. And more than likely, it could be as high as 27th, which the way things are going today, it will be 27th. So that's something to like. So the Rangers do have, look, I don't think there's any scenario, especially looking at the teams here, right? Vincent Trocheck and the first round pick is not moving you up into the 1 or the 2. There's absolutely no reason for either of those teams to give up those picks. Toronto needs all the good capital they can get. They won the draft lottery. Congratulations. There's no reason for San Jose. It is an interesting point, though, to the point that you were making, Eric, where San Jose actually does have forwards. Maybe they want to trade back from a defensive standpoint to draft one of the defensemen. I doubt it, just because they're the only two players in tier 1 in this draft.
Yeah.
But I could see Drury at least calling his boy and seeing if there's something to be done with the 5th overall. And I don't think the 5th overall and Braden Schneider's enough to get there, obviously. But I'd at least kick some tires if I was Drury on this.
I would be surprised but not shocked if that.
See, I was going to say I would be shocked if it actually happened.
I think it's plausible. I mean, you make a good point, right? That like San Jose is loaded in its forward ranks. Like, I mean, you have Will Smith, Michael Bisa, Macklin Celebrini. Yes, well, obviously you would love to be adding Ivar Stenberg to that if you were the San Jose Sharks. But yeah, I mean, they certainly have other needs. Defense is one of those needs. So it's not insane to the point where I would say that I would be totally shocked by it, but I would be surprised if that happened.
All right, Keegan comes on in 10 minutes. Overall thoughts here. If I had to pick, I'm certainly disappointed. I would have really liked to not fall to 4th or 5th.
Of course.
Like we said before, the chances of staying at 3rd were basically they were the lowest odds by a mile. The Rangers falling to 5th overall does leave them sort of in the hands of what's going to happen in front of them. Obviously, I'm not breaking any news by saying that McKenna and Stenberg were always off the board if you didn't win the lottery. The question now becomes, and again, the reason I'm harping on Malhotra is simply because we know that the Rangers are very high on him. So, I know that that's a target of theirs. I've heard nothing about Chase Reed. I've heard nothing about Verhoff. I've heard, actually nothing about really anyone else except for Malhotra. My gut, and to your point, Eric, we don't know how this is going to play out. Who knows? My gut is telling me he probably doesn't last to 5. And I'm curious to see what the Rangers do in response to that, especially in the moment. But
yeah,
this obviously is not the way that Drury was hoping it would play out.
The only mitigating factor for me there again is your gut and the guts of NHL general managers are not the same thing.
Sure, fair.
I feel
like
at
the end of your point.
I think that you are possibly just way too high personally on Caleb Malhotra and projecting that onto a lot of other people.
I'm actually not. The only point, like I just said, the only reason that I'm talking about Malhotra is because he's been linked to the Rangers. I don't have any indication. I have outside of McKenna and Stenberg, I don't have any personal bias to anyone. I just feel like that just felt like a fit. Obviously,
is what you're saying then that because you just think that everything that the Rangers want is going to go wrong for them, that's why you think he's going to be gone by 5th overall?
Correct. Yes, that is literally that is literally what I'm saying. If you're asking me to realistically put something out there, I feel like Malhotra would be somebody that the Rangers would be interested in. They certainly need with centers. They probably don't want, and I shouldn't say want. I think their preference would be for there to be more forwards available to them. I do think the gap between Lawrence and Malhotra has really exaggerated. Some of that, again, is playoffs. Remember, literally the reason the Rangers drafted Kaliev was because of his playoff performance in the KHL. Or Kravtsov, I'm sorry. And I just feel like playoff performances are one of the things that get these guys fired up, that they think these are 16-point game players and these are guys we can bring over. Where I'm having a little bit of trouble and why I'm projecting Malhotra into this is I would be a little surprised if the Rangers took a defenseman, just because it feels like they have more issues at offensive forwards than anything else right now, and it's what they need more of.
Do they?
But you're also you're also dictated by who's available at the draft.
Yes.
So I'm just curious to see how Drury handles this.
I really just don't know that they need. I mean, they need forwards and they need defensemen.
They kind of need
that's
everything
just the
to
reality.
be clear with. Yes.
Right. I mean, they need everything except for goaltending. Beyond, they should definitely be taking a goaltender later in the draft that they can run through the magic of the Rangers goaltending machine. But they really need everything other than goaltending. So I just don't know that that's going to be the case, that they're going to look at it and say, oh, well, we just cannot take a defenseman because we just have such a clear need at forward. They have clear needs at defenseman too, especially if you accept that Braden Schneider is more than likely out of here.
We have, I'm on Twitter and I'm looking at, we have live views right now. I'm
I tell
waving
you
my
what,
hand to see how
we have about
back it is. There we
5
go.
minutes before Keegan joins us.
My ADD completely took over there, and I was just looking at myself talking on the screen. Yes, sorry, I'm back. All right, so Keegan's coming on in 5 minutes. Go ahead.
5 minutes, yeah. I'm going to run quickly through because it's a pretty short ombudsman report this week. So to tell people what we got wrong from last week, this is the podcast ombudsman report for episode 81, where every week Charlie listens to the podcast and tells us everything we got wrong, starting with Michael Nylander. The discussion of New York Rangers legend Martin Straka brought up the Rangers' tenure of Michael Nylander, who had the good fortune of centering Jaromir Jagr for 2 seasons. As Joe and Eric said, he was at his best with the Rangers, putting up 162 points in 160 regular season games. Despite that success, the Rangers decided to let Michael Nylander walk during the 2007 offseason, quote, upgrading, unquote, at the center position by signing who, Joe? Do you remember?
Do not.
Scott Gomez and Chris Drury. Agents. The most points that either of them put up in a single season was Gomez's 70 during 2007-2008. And has been previously covered by the Ombudsman. Neither played out the contract they signed with the Rangers or any team. We are still paying for the sins of the 2007 offseason to this day. Unfortunately, Joe and Eric repeatedly referred to Michael Nylander as William Nylander. William Nylander is Michael Nylander's 30-year-old son, who is on the Toronto Maple Leafs, at least for now, at least until they decide that he isn't a 16-game player and trade him for more grit. Michael Nylander's career high in points was 83 in the 2005-2006 season with the Rangers. William has topped that total 3 times and came close this season by putting up 79 points despite missing 17 games. While discussing Jagr and his long and illustrious career, Eric mistakenly said that, quote, Jagr went on to play 10 more seasons in the NHL. Jagr actually went to the KHL to play 3 seasons with Omsk on Avangard before returning to the NHL for 7 more seasons with long list of teams: the Flyers, the Dallas Stars, the Boston Bruins, the New Jersey Devils, the Florida Panthers, and the Calgary Flames, before calling it quits in the NHL in January 2018. Jagr has since gone back to Czechia, where he still played 9 more seasons for the Kladno Knights, including 6 games this season. While Jagr has not officially retired, he has said that his professional hockey career is likely complete back in March. His international incident. The question of which Ranger is most likely to cause an international incident reminds us of the fact that the Rangers already traded the one player who actually did cause an international incident, which the Ombudsman covered back in December. That, of course, is Artemi Panarin. 2014 Eastern Conference Final. While discussing the 2014 Eastern Conference Final, Eric said that he remembers the Rangers beating the Canadiens 7-1 in Game 1. Game 1 was actually 7-2 Rangers win. Carey Price was pulled during the second intermission and would not play again in that series. Final 2 here. McDavid contract. Eric and Joe suggested that McDavid gave the Oilers a discount between $5 million and $15 million. McDavid's extension is for an AAV of $12.5 million starting next year. The NHL salary cap is going to be $104 million next year. The maximum player contract is 20% of the salary cap, which is $20.8 million. Therefore, McDavid is giving the Oilers an $8.3 million discount for the next 2 seasons. And finally,
congrats, buddy. Good for you.
It was awfully bold of Joe and Eric to make predictions about how the draft lottery is going to go for the Rangers when they're going to be live streaming during the lottery. For the record, Joe predicted that the Rangers will pick 5th. Good job, Joe. You nailed it. And I predicted that the Rangers would pick 5th. And that concludes the Ombudsman.
All right. Before Keegan comes on, he's coming on in 2 minutes. I've been texting a group of people.
All right.
And most of the responses I have gotten back, to the point that Eric was making before, nobody feels like there's a major difference between 3 and 5 in this year's draft. So
There you go.
there you go. I would rather the Rangers take a forward. This is me personally now.
I think I
And
agree with you.
and if I would think just at the way that the draft board is shaking out, if Malhotra is taken before 5, I don't think there's a forward I would pick over those other defensemen that would be available.
You're not
Unless you trade back.
You're not into Tynan Lawrence?
Not at 5. And if you're into him, then you maybe trade back to, 7 or 8 or whatever and
Look,
see if
I
he's
think
still there and see what you can't grab.
the wild card player, I think is, and I know Chris has talked about him extensively, Viggo Bjork. The problem is 2 things. One, he, I think, profiles too far back already in the draft for a 5th overall pick. I think the Rangers would be inviting a hell of a lot of criticism. And he also does not profile as a Chris Drury type player, both of which militate against the idea that he will be selected. But I think that is probably, by my lights, your most talented forward who is going to be available. But man, would they catch some hell probably for taking him at 5th overall.
Well, and that's a player too that theoretically could slide their way back into the 20s. Sometimes
Possibly.
those guys just slip. So
Possibly.
Well, we have already talked about something depressing, which is the New York Rangers falling to the worst possible draft position that they had. We've now brought on Blueshirt Banter correspondent Keegan Jarvis to talk about something somehow even more depressing, which is the Hartford Wolf Pack. Keegan, welcome. You're
Welcome to
joining
the
at a
pity
great
party,
time.
Keegan.
Yeah, Eric and I already hate ourselves, so now you're
Yeah.
joining this little. You're joining us as well.
Can I offer you a bleach teeny?
I'm in.
All right. Bleach teenies all around.
He's probably had to have a few of those as he's been subjected to quite a few Hartford Wolfpack games. So, Keegan, before we get to the mass firings, which it's a dark show when everybody losing their job is the positive outlook on a situation. Why don't you give some high-level thoughts?
Yes,
and happy news. Why don't you give some high-level thoughts on Hartford just for people who are maybe not? I think we've referenced that they're an unmitigated disaster. It's better to hear it from the source. So why don't you give us just a quick elevator pitch on just how much of a piece of shit things were down there?
Absolutely. And first off, I thank you guys for having me back on. Great to be back on for the first Banter live stream. Is that what we're officially calling it?
Very first one.
Awesome. But I'm glad I can be the guinea pig for the group.
Yep, absolutely.
But yeah, so diving into Hartford this season, disaster is probably the nicest way to put it, I think. You could use a lot of other terms that might be a little more mean, but we'll stick with disaster for now. Pretty much everything that could go wrong did go wrong. They ended up in last place league-wide, 32nd out of 32 teams in the American Hockey League. Truly a season to forget for a lot of people. And you saw the first domino start to fall this past weekend with the mass firing of their coaching staff. So hopefully we can turn this into something positive, but certainly not a season that anyone wants to remember here.
So it's not very often that we advocate for mass firings. On a scale from 1 being this was a mistake, they shouldn't have done this, to a 10, which is like, why did this take so long? Where do you put this, the complete overhaul of the coaching staff?
I'll put it between a 9 and a 10.
Okay, that's pretty.
The only reason I'm not a firm 10, I think there's a little bit of validity to my kind of take on things is that I believe that they gave Grant Potulny and his staff kind of the season to figure it out. And if it didn't work out, I thought they were pretty much gone. And so it was a justified firing, was probably a deserved firing. And I feel a little bad for saying that because I did have a pretty good relationship with Grant. But you look at the results on the ice and what else can you do other than clean house after a season like this?
There seem to be some pretty legitimate concerns about his ability to develop. And, something that Eric and I have talked about pretty repeatedly with Chris Drury is I understand it's a pain point for a lot of people that he's literally basically completely safe. But generally speaking, that makes better business decisions when somebody's not coaching or GMing for their job. It never felt like we were getting a developmental coach in Hartford. And I'm curious what your take is on that, especially now. It just felt like all the players weren't playing in positions that made sense at the NHL level. Felt like Brett Berard was put in a completely different role in Hartford than he was expected to play at the NHL level. Gabe Perreault's sort of different just because of the skill level. Scott Morrow, I want to get to, but just never felt like there was any cohesion there. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on.
Yeah, I think in terms of the developmental standpoint, you kind of have to go on a case by case basis. Whereas someone like Berard, who I think probably was playing a different role down in the AHL than he would have in the NHL, you look at a guy like an Adam Sokora or a Jaroslav Hmelar who really flourished this season. And at times, Potulny did give them opportunities to play up in the lineup. I believe on opening night, Jaroslav Hmelar was the fourth line right winger in Hartford. And by really the end of October, early November, say, he was the first line right winger. And, I think he recognized that this guy's playing really well. We got to give him some increased opportunity. And as a result, Hmelar built his way up into now potentially being a legit NHL option next year. He had a really good stint at the end of the season. Same with Sokora, same with a guy like Dylan Garand. So there are some guys that you can look at and say, these guys did develop over these past 2 seasons that Potulny was at the helm. But then there's others. Berard is one. Brennan Othman is another that really took a step back over the last couple of seasons and, of course, was traded at the deadline. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis in terms of development. But if you're looking at the overall picture, that lack of consistency is probably something that contributed to Potulny losing his job.
From an overall perspective, is there anything that went well this season or over the last couple of seasons? Is there anything that you could point to as positives outside of there are some individual players who admittedly surprised us too, with Sokora and Hmelar being as good as they were when they came up. I had kind of expected Dylan Garand to be about what Dylan Garand was when he came up. Is there anything in terms of what's going on in Hartford that you can point to and say, this is a positive from a more holistic perspective rather than picking out a couple of individuals who clearly did excel?
Yeah, if you're looking at the full picture of the last 2 seasons, it's pretty hard to pick out really any positives. 2 seasons where obviously they finished last in the league this year. I believe they were a bottom 5 team last year as well. No playoffs in either one of those seasons. And this is in the AHL, who allows 23 of 32 teams into the playoffs. So you kind of have to struggle to not make it in. It is quite a system down here in Hartford. But yeah, looking at the overall picture, it's pretty tough to say really anything positive outside of those individual assignments. So yeah, that's a reason that Grant Potulny is no longer the head coach here in Hartford.
I don't think that I had realized that many teams make the playoffs, which I guess also makes the I've lived here in Grand Rapids, Michigan now for 5 years, and the Grand Rapids Griffins were hellaciously bad the first couple of years that I lived here, and had just an insane season this year. And so, like, I knew they'd be in the playoffs, but it's like I went and actually had looked today at where their series was at. They're tied 1-1. They play tomorrow night here in Grand Rapids against Manitoba, and that's when I first realized, like, there are a lot of playoff matchups going on here. This is kind of bonkers.
Yeah, it is a massive playoff field. It was something that really came out of the end of COVID. The AHL lost pretty much a season and a half and didn't award the Calder Cup for 2 years. So coming out of that, I think they just kind of threw something at the wall, and it's stuck because, you get a couple extra teams, some playoff games and playoff revenue, if we want to say that. So that's what we're working with, at least for the meantime.
Eric, do you have any other bigger picture questions before we start diving into specific players?
Go for it.
So the biggest player I want to talk about is Scott Morrow, who we've had a variety of conversations about. I'm obviously a pretty big Scott Morrow fan. Pretty alarming that Mike Sullivan, a coach that just seems to churn out defensive players, didn't love anything he saw from Scott Morrow. We had Scott Wheeler on the show a few weeks ago, and he was on my side. Not that Eric is against me in the, actually you kind of are. In the Scott Morrow was not nearly as bad as it seems like the Rangers think he was. What was your take on the Morrow that Hartford got this year versus what we got at the NHL level?
Yeah, at the beginning of the season, he started off pretty slowly. I think we actually texted a little bit about it, Joe, kind of at the
We
beginning
did.
of the year. Like there was one game where he didn't have any points, but he had 7 shots on goal. And it was like, this was a guy who was generating opportunities from the blue line, just wasn't getting rewarded. And then he had that long stint in the NHL and he was kind of shuffling back and forth. But really by the end of the year, I thought he was one of Hartford's better defensemen, which, is probably not a very high bar to cross for this season, but there were some games where he really seemed to take over down in Hartford, and it was a real joy to watch him at times. I think his stats are probably not really telling of the season he had. I actually have it pulled up here if I can click on the right tab. He had 5 goals and 14 assists for 19 points in 34 games down in Hartford. He was also a minus 16, but you're going to struggle to find anybody who was a plus this season. So I don't really hold that against him. I thought Morrow was pretty good down in Hartford. He might not have been that AHL All-Star level that he played at last year, but I think he's a guy that probably should have gotten a bit more of a look in the NHL, especially on the power play. That is his bread and butter type of thing. So the fact that he didn't get that was really surprising to me because he did kind of excel in that role here in Hartford.
Can you clarify that when you say that he was one of the better defensemen in Hartford, do you mean that he showed the offensive talent that I think we were all expecting from him? I mean, again, I take your point well in terms of nobody was probably a plus this year in Hartford, or really, I don't know how many we even were on the Rangers. Or did he seem to be a more well-rounded defenseman in Hartford? Because I think the substance of the disagreement that Joe and I have about him, which is less a personal opinion of mine saying that I don't think Scott Morrow should be given time, is again more in my is-ought distinction stuff. I think just the way that NHL executives think about defensemen is the amount, like you have to be Erik Karlsson to have that poor of a defensive acumen and be able to stick in the NHL. And while I think Scott Morrow is probably a pretty good offensive defenseman, don't think he's Erik Karlsson good. And I just don't know of that many coaches or franchises that are going to put somebody on the ice as a defenseman, no matter how good they are offensively, if they think that they are a perpetual liability to give up a goal every time their skates touch the ice. So did you see anything from him in Hartford that suggests that maybe he's figuring it out from the defensive side of the game?
I think he got better over the course of the season in his own zone. I still think there's probably some things he has to work on, but I do think from the beginning of the season towards the end of the season, you saw a lot of better play in his own zone. And again, you're going to look at some score sheets and you might see him be like a -4, but like the team lost 8-1 or something like that. You can't really hold that individual performance against him in that regard. But on a larger picture basis, kind of splitting it into first half of the season, second half of the season, I thought Morrow was a lot better defensively in the second half. I do still think he has some things to work on if he wants to be that regular NHLer that the Rangers would like to see him develop into. The offensive instincts are there, but the defense could certainly use a little bit more.
Let's go easier rather than harder. What happened with Brett Berard? Felt like he was a up and coming, I don't mean superstar like he was going to blow the doors off offensively, but surefire bottom 6, adds a little bit of jam, adds some energy, constant motor, adds some offense type guy. And now I would put him firmly in the definitely not a Mike Sullivan guy. Doesn't seem like he's got a real future with the Rangers. Sokora certainly made an impact in the few NHL games that he played. I'd like to talk about him in a minute too. But not very often you see a depth fall from grace the way that Berard has had. And I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, to kind of go off what you're saying with, being Mike Sullivan guys, I think the guys like Sokora and Chmelar, they have a bit more of what he's looking for in a bottom 6 guy. They're energy guys. They're going to lay hits. They're going to get in on the forecheck. They're going to win some board battles. And Berard has some of those qualities too. He can bring energy. He's got speed to get in on the forecheck, but I think when Sullivan is putting together a bottom 6, he's going to look for a guy more like Sokora or more like Chmelar or more like a Ty Cartier, who the Rangers claimed off waivers this season, who will throw hits and can score if they have to, but they're going to be more just guys that are tough to play against. Berard just didn't really show that this season. And then when you're not showing that and the offense isn't really clicking in the way it has in the past, it ends up with a season like this. So it was kind of a tough season for Berard. He did end injured. He ended up having an injury. I believe it was like mid-March. He got into a fight, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and that was pretty much it for the season. So I don't know what's next for him. He's a restricted free agent, if I'm correct. I don't know if the Rangers will qualify him. I don't know if maybe they won't. It's going to be a very interesting case. I think he's probably one of the more interesting cases coming into this offseason. A really tough year for Berard, a guy who I've really enjoyed watching in Hartford this season, or the last few seasons, right?
I hate to do it. I'll give Eric his flowers. Eric was one of the ones who was at the beginning of the year was like, I just don't see what the hype is with this guy. It never made sense to him, and ended up being spot on that this is, look, I really liked Berard. I liked Berard a lot last year. Part of my concern with Sokora is much like I think we got enamored by Berard last year because he was a good young thing on a really shitty year. Yeah. And is that what happened to Sokora this year? I'm not pinning that on him. I think Sokora has a couple of things going for him that Berard did not. Sokora's played in a shitload of professional hockey games, if you're including like the time that he spent overseas and in the AHL. Is he even 21 yet? Keegan, I think he is, right? He just turned 21, if I'm not mistaken.
He turned 21 this year. His rookie year in the AHL, he was 19. He turned 19 in like that September. So he was very young in his rookie season. So he's still a very young guy.
So there's a lot of room to kind of grow there, in my opinion. And Sokora got gushing praise from Mike Sullivan about the fact that he was just absolutely never had a bad day, and he scored some goals and added some offense for sure, and just felt like that was a bigger Mike Sullivan fit than anything else. So Keegan, I'll throw it to you. Do you have similar feelings of kind of how I've been excited to see Sokora for a long time? I'm actually very happy he got his opportunity with the Rangers. That I think he's going to fill that depth role that we kind of thought Berard was going to fill. What are your takes from having watched him for, 2 full seasons?
Yeah, I've been saying Adam Sokora is a future NHLer since his rookie season. And even before that, when he first came over back in 22-23, he drew into playoff games as an 18-year-old and didn't look out of place. So I've been singing his praises for a while, and he's also genuinely one of the nicest people I've ever met. Like, he and Chmelar, this is a real story. They offered me a ride once after a Wolfpack game in like last January, I believe. So I was super happy for him to see.
Sorry, did you not take them up on it?
Listen, the story goes, I was walking out of the People's Bank Arena. It was then the XL Center. And kind of the way you go out, you go up the like service entrance, right? I'm walking up the service entrance onto the street in Hartford. My car is in a lot across the street, so it's not a far walk. Under the service entrance is like where the players park for games, and they happen to drive up in a car next to me while I'm walking up this ramp. And Chmelar rolled down the window, was like, "Do you need a ride?" I'm like, I appreciate it, but my car is right there. So I didn't take them up on it. I guess I should have, but
why wouldn't you take them up on it? What is wrong with you?
There's a lot. Where do you want to start?
I want to start with you not getting in the fucking car.
Yeah, I guess that was a missed opportunity that I will have to I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. So
the 5 seconds of being in the vehicle with them would have been a life-changing experience for you.
Yeah, hey guys, can you drive me 10 seconds up the road and just take a quick right?
You could have lied.
My car's right
been
here.
Like, yeah, drive me home, and then just Ubered back. It probably would have been worth it for whatever it was.
You could have gotten a great story out of that, Keegan. Come on, man.
Yeah, I guess, you know what? It may have been. So the next time I get offered a ride in downtown Hartford, I guess I'm just going to take it.
You have to. You don't have a choice.
Caveat from a Hartford Wolf Pack player. If somebody random just offers you a ride in downtown Hartford, Connecticut, I would not take them up on that offer if I were you.
Yeah, absolutely not.
I'll close out the Berard real quick, and then I got one more question for you. To me, the Berard problem was like just what he brought to the Rangers would have largely been the same thing that Connor Sherry brought to the Rangers, only that Connor Sherry came along with a whole heaping of NHL experience and actually having been in the playoffs and won championships. While I understand people not liking that decision, I also understand why somebody like Mike Sullivan made a decision to have a guy like that on the team. And unfortunately, yes, it crowds out a guy like Brett Berard. And then on the other hand, too, he did have some time this season to come up and do something, and he did not record a single point in any of the games that he played for the Rangers this season. So, I mean, he had a chance there and just didn't do much with it. That being said, we've talked about Berard, who came up last year. We've talked about Chmelar. We have talked about Sokora. We have talked about Garand. Who on the Hartford Wolf Pack that you have seen this past season do you think has the best opportunity to earn a spot on the Rangers next year, either out of training camp or perhaps as things shake out during the season, getting an opportunity to be called up and just absolutely pushing their way into the lineup?
I'm going to go with the guy that Chris has been shouting out a ton over the last few years. I'm going to go with Brody Lamb. He turned pro this season, signed his ATO in Hartford. In 15 games, he had 9 points. I believe it was 4 goals, 5 assists, if I can fact check myself quickly. Yeah, 4 goals, 5 assists in 15 games. For a rookie who is turning pro, and even a guy who did play all 4 years in college, that's really impressive. Again, this was my 4th season being around the Wolfpack. I've seen a myriad of guys come in on ATOs and get, transferred over from Europe late in the season. Sokora, Chmelar, Adam Edstrom, Victor Mancini, Noah Laba last year. None of them looked as comfortable in their kind of initial stints in pro hockey as Brody Lamb did. He drew right in. He had a 6-game point streak, which was the longest such streak by a Wolfpack player this season. He just looked super comfortable, and I think he's a guy that really could make some noise next season, if not in training camp, then in the AHL, and could fight his way onto the Rangers next year.
Go back to Chmelar, who I don't think have talked about probably enough. Definitely felt like, so he got some looks, got into a fight, I think maybe in his first NHL game. Definitely a Mike Sullivan player, bigger body. Him and Sokora have like a bromance, which because you didn't get in the vehicle with them. But like, that feels like a guy who's probably going to make a real case to make the Rangers next year. And I'm not sure he was on anybody's bingo card when we were going into the season. So what was your takeaway from what you saw from him at the AHL level, what you saw from him at the NHL level? Is this a guy that you think is probably not going to be back in Hartford next year? What's your take there?
I think I'd be pretty surprised to see him in Hartford next year. He took a really big step forward this season. The development that he went through from last year to this year, it was significant. So I don't imagine he would make his way to Hartford next season. I think he's got an inside track to securing that 4th line right wing spot in the NHL. He's shown he can fight. He's shown he can hit. He's got deceptive speed for a big man. That guy is quick. He can score a little bit too. He showed a little bit of scoring punch. He's got some nice hands. So I'd be surprised to see him in Hartford next year. And again, I'm super happy for him. Like I mentioned, one of the nicest guys I've seen come through Hartford. And I think he is, at this point, is an NHL player.
I was unbelievably impressed with him. I think, flew a little under the radar because Sokora was just such a bolt of lightning at the end of the year. But I really think the Rangers may have something there. Look, we were going into the season, we were kind of talking about how Edstrom and Rempe could really have the makings of an awesome 4th line for the New York Rangers with Sam Carrick. Carrick obviously isn't here anymore. Edstrom kind of fell out of favor. I have serious questions about whether or not Matt Rempe is an NHL player in general. I wouldn't put Edstrom in the I don't think he's an NHL player category like I would put for Rempe. I'd put Edstrom in like I'm not totally sure that guy is in the fold anymore, but the Sokora Chmelar figure out who's going to be your 4th line center, that does have some legs to it, I would think. So definitely intrigued about that. Let me ask one more player question, and then we can kind of get into forward looking for the Wolf Pack. With Jonathan Quick retiring, absolutely feels like it's Garand's time to shine. I feel like he had an overall good year in Hartford. I'm going to put him in the Scott Morrow camp of like, what the fuck do you expect when a team is this bad? What is your take on the year Garand had? And do you think there's a reason the Rangers should be not optimistic to throw him in the backup role next year?
I think Garand will be the first person to tell you that he had a worse year this year than he did last year. And I think that's just because he holds himself to just such a high standard that seeing a dip in his numbers at all is what's frustrating to him. But when you look at kind of the overall picture, you look at his season, you look at the Wolfpack season in general, this is a guy that every night was giving his team a chance to win. I mean, if we look back in January 28th, Wolfpack hosted the Charlotte Checkers. Garand started that night, had a tough game, gave up 7 goals. For the rest of his time in Hartford, he did not give up more than 2 goals in a game. So, like, he really ended on a strong note, and then, of course, parlayed that into a couple of really solid games up in the NHL. I do not think that the Rangers should have any concerns about him being the backup to Igor Shesterkin next year. And we know Shesterkin is going to be the workhorse. He's going to get the lion's share of starting time. If Garand can give you, 25, 30 starts, you should absolutely feel comfortable about that. Garand is a guy that I've loved watching during my time in Hartford. I've seen his entire pro career up to this point. I've covered him for 4 years. So I really think he's a guy that is going to succeed in the NHL. I believe he's an NHL player. I don't think he should be back in Hartford at all. And he said as much at breakup day. He never wants to go back in the American League. And I agree with him. Even as someone who would like to see him back for at least one more game, he should never be back. He's a guy that I'm really excited to see his career play out.
Did he also offer you a ride in your car and you turned him down?
He did not. He did not. But he did say hi to me by name at a practice once, and he's the only guy that's done that. So I'll give him props there.
All right, that's fine. He deserves that. Eric, any other player-specific questions?
No.
All right, last player question, Keegan. Who is a Hartford Wolf Pack player that people are not talking enough about? Not an obvious one.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot here.
Yeah, that's just throwing you a blind pass. And I'm giving you a little bit of time right now by talking for you to think this through.
I'll go with 2 guys that had really solid ends to their season when the season was pretty much completely lost for Hartford. And that's Bryce McConnell-Barker and Carey Terrance. They really got opportunities at the end of the year. The Wolfpack were dealing with a ton of injuries, and so many guys were called up that they were pretty much just looking for bodies to fill out a lineup. And those are 2 guys that really stepped up. Terrance, over his last 8 games, played at a point per game pace. He had 8 points. McConnell-Barker in his last 13 games had 10 points. Those are 2 guys that, really took a step forward. And you could see that maybe roll over into a good summer and potentially into a solid stint next season. So those are 2 guys that I would kind of watch for next year. I thought they progressed pretty well throughout the season, even if the stats don't look that pretty. And those are 2 guys that I think you should pay a little bit of attention to next year. I'm not saying they'll become the next Sokora and Chmelar, where they'll just take these massive steps and become certified NHLers next year, but they're 2 guys that I think you should be a little intrigued by heading into the 26-27 season.
All right. Forward thinking. Hartford has a clean slate to work with. Literally no coaches. So what do you hope they do?
So what I'm kind of looking for in a new coach, I'm looking for a guy who wants to balance development with winning, because you can do both. And I've heard countless times from Ranger fans, from hockey fans in general, that, the purpose of the AHL is solely development. And to an extent, I agree. But I think part of development is building a winning culture in your organization. And you need a guy who is going to be able to do that behind your bench. If you're solely focusing on development, that's when your AHL team turns into just a player pool. And it's just guys you're picking up whenever you need them. And that doesn't build anything culturally. You got to build from the ground up. So I want to see a guy who is going to prioritize guys getting their time and reward guys who deserves it with more time, but also is going to try to play to win, because I think there is a balance that you can do, and that's what I want to see moving forward.
Anyone in mind that you have?
There's no specific names I have right now. I've looked around just to see who's available. I would have to imagine you'll probably see someone coming from a Team USA connection. Grant Potulny had that before he got the job. He worked with Ryan Martin on, I believe, a couple of World Junior teams. So I wouldn't be surprised to see someone like that come in again. But I don't have a specific name right now that I'm kind of looking for. I'll have to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that over the next couple of weeks.
Is this even a remotely desirable job, Keegan?
I think it can be. I mean, if you're an AHL head coach, you're one step behind the NHL. Like, that alone makes it desirable. I do think there's some things that need to change organizationally if you want to really attract top end talent, be it players, be it coaches, be it executives. But I don't see why it wouldn't be desirable to someone who maybe wants to further their career a little bit.
Eric, I defer to you now.
I think I'm good.
Keegan, any other things you want to talk about from a Hartford Wolf Pack perspective?
I'm glad the season has come to a conclusion. This was a tough one. But even through all of that, I do enjoy getting to go to the arena and getting to bring my coverage of the Wolf Pack to everybody here. So even in a tough season like this, it was still a lot of fun. And the last game I saw was one of the most phenomenal comebacks I've seen during my time in Hartford. So I will take that ending, and we'll hope for better in 26-27.
Yeah. Great work and great coverage. We really enjoyed it this season, and hopefully next season is a little bit more fun. And some of those game recap stories that you're publishing at blueshirtbanter.com will say Wolfpack win rather than Wolfpack fall yet again.
I want to put out a Wolfpack qualify for Calder Cup playoff piece.
There we go.
I haven't gotten to do that at Banter yet. I want that to happen.
Aspirations, baby.
Absolutely.
There we go.
It's the way that it goes. Keegan Jarvis, everybody, you can, Keegan, I'm going to give you an opportunity to plug your stuff, but you should definitely, if you join the Banter for nothing else, join the Banter to read Keegan. He is the best at what he does from a Hartford Wolfpack perspective. He's at a bunch of games. He does his own little videos before the games, after the game. So just pay attention to Keegan. You should definitely do that. It helps everybody, including me. This is how I become an oil oligarch. So that's how it happens. Keegan, plug your stuff. Let us know what we can watch and read from you. And then, we'll let you get out of Dodge, and Eric and I will take some depressing draft lottery questions.
Yeah, I hang out mostly on Twitter at the Keegan Jarvis. You can find me there at Wolfpack Games, just talking hockey. I will have plenty of stuff coming to the site as well this offseason. I've got something in the hopper right now about just a big recap of Hartford's season, and fair warning, it's going to be pretty long. So there is a lot to talk about there. You'll be hearing from me grades, awards, a whole kind of breakdown of Grant Potulny's tenure here in Hartford. There's going to be a lot that you're hearing from me over the summer. So hopefully you stick around, and hopefully we'll see you next season back at the People's Bank Arena in downtown Hartford.
Keegan, Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
Appreciate you, my friend, and we'll talk to you probably over the summer, I'm sure.
Yeah, gentlemen, I appreciate it again. Let's go Wolfpack.
Let's go Wolfpack. Eric, my computer's doing something weird, and I don't want to break anything. I need you to read the questions. This second tab situation is terrifying me.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a question about this, and if there is, then I will acknowledge it. But let's just dispense with the Jed Ortmeyer, Tanner Glass stuff. And
yeah, let's actually let's get through that. Yeah, that's a good point.
So
go ahead. You can.
I wrote a piece about this. So over the weekend, just prior to the firings of the entire Wolfpack coaching staff that we were just talking about with Keegan, the Rangers parted ways with Jed Ortmeyer, who for the last, I believe, 9 seasons had been their director of player development. For at least a period of that time, Tanner Glass was the co-director of player development. He has been elevated into sole possession of that role. Look, here is my perspective on it. And there is at least one person who seems to have some reading comprehension issues that I tried to address in the comments. I am not dying on any hill about Tanner Glass here. I would have preferred almost anybody else in this role, but not for the reason that I saw a whole lot of people suggesting, which is Tanner Glass was a bad NHL hockey player, which I am not here to argue with you about that. As I noted in my piece, I didn't go back and look, but Joe, you were certainly there, and I was reading the banter back then. Plenty of digital ink, I'm sure, was spilled about why the hell is Tanner Glass even on this hockey team. Nobody really liked it other than a few people, and people kind of enjoyed it almost in spite of itself, just kind of for the entertainment, for the lulls. So I am with you on not people on not thinking that Tanner Glass was the right person to elevate to this role. I don't think who he was as an NHL player has the damnedest thing to do with why he should not be in this role in the front office of the Rangers. If you go around and you look at people who are in player development roles around the National Hockey League, more often than not, they are guys who had very minor, insignificant, and in the best cases, just kind of meh NHL careers. Like, these are not cases where you're getting elite talent that is in a player development role in your franchise. I think you also see this play out with coaches, right? Like, you look at successful coaches, more often than not, they are you would probably say journeyman type guys. Like, Joe Quenneville is the current active NHL wins leader. He played 800 some hockey games, perfectly good, like 200 some points, not really anything stupendous. He was defenseman, so you're not expecting him to put up a ton of points from that position unless you're like a Brian Leach type. But you look around at examples where you tried to get someone of premier talent and skill as a head coach. And there's no better example of this than the couple of seasons that Wayne Gretzky was a coach with the Phoenix Coyotes. And he was under 500 over 3 seasons. He had one season over 500. That was one game over 500. I just don't think that who these guys were as NHL players has anything to do with how good they are in these positions. My preference would have been for the Rangers to just clear house of that entire department and bring in outside voices. So I am amenable to all of you who are saying that Tanner Glass is a terrible selection for this. I think you're very likely right about that, but I think that has everything to do with the fact that he was a part of the previous regime and has almost nothing to do with who he was as an NHL player. Because as I titled the piece, I have no idea what makes for a good director of player development, and I really don't think very many people, if any, out there who are reading that piece know either.
Your take and my take are exactly the same, and I'm suing you for plagiarism. My commentary on this, and look, I'm just going to be honest with all of you. You are not going to find more detrimental shit written about Tanner Glass than from Joe Fortunato from 2015 till he was not a Ranger anymore. I don't remember when it was. I could not. He may be the player I hated the most just from what he represented in terms of the Rangers going in the wrong direction from an analytic perspective after making it to the Stanley Cup final. The players that Pavel Buchnevich sat in playoff games for Tanner Glass. I could not have hated Tanner Glass, the player, more. I, like you, Eric, do not think that who Tanner Glass was as a player makes a goddamn difference to what he is from terms of prospect development and player development. I mentioned the fact that he went to Dartmouth. Obviously, that is an Ivy League education. He's a very smart individual. Somebody mocked me for that. Like, oh, he went to Dartmouth, so he should get the job. Like, that's not what I'm saying. The point that I'm trying to make is the reason I don't like this has nothing to do with Tanner Glass, the player. I actually think Tanner Glass might be a really good fit in this role, believe it or not. There was not a more beloved player than Tanner Glass in terms of the way that the players and the organization felt about him. By all accounts, the nicest guy in the world. I absolutely could see someone like that thriving in this role with the New York Rangers. My issue here is, to your point, Eric, if it's not working, and it was very clearly not working, clean house. Why even go internal in that, for this role? Now, I am going to give Tanner Glass a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that we have given Chris Drury, which is probably going to drive some of you insane, which is it's hard to blame Glass, who's not the guy, for Jet Ortmeyer's sins. Now, I'll also caveat this by saying I have no fucking idea what was happening in the player development department. Maybe Tanner Glass was 100% on board with everything that Jet Ortmeyer was doing. I kind of doubt it because I feel like Chris Drury wouldn't have given him the role otherwise. But I won't, the same way that you and I refuse to blame Chris Drury for the sins of Jeff Gordon and John Davidson, I refuse to do the same thing with Tanner. I'm not going to put, one on the other. He's not the guy. It's difficult for him to be held to those sins. But I am absolutely in favor of corporal punishment in this situation.
Yeah.
Just like, you know what? Nobody, just like in Hartford, would not have made sense to fire it. Right. Just clean the whole thing up and go. It has nothing to do with Tanner Glass, the player. Zero. I really don't think that matters.
Yeah. No, I think that is right. I have to assume the logic would seem to suggest, especially if they were in co-director of player development positions at the end there, that in the conversations, Tanner Glass made an argument for, I would do this, that, and the other thing differently.
Correct.
And maybe that's not the case. Like, look, I am more amenable to Chris Drury doesn't know what he's doing than I have been at any point in the past. We've talked that to death. We're not going to do it again here right now, but maybe it's just the case. But I would think the logic would suggest that in whatever conversations were had, he suggested, like, I think we should do this differently. Like, if you have that put in front of you just as a situation, like, we're getting rid of this guy, we're now interviewing you essentially for this job. What would you do differently? You got to have an answer to that. And again, answers to what this role does have been all over the place. Everything from is just like they're there to help guys figure out how to be a pro, more from the like a holistic sense than a how do you maximize your skill sets and turn into the best possible player. Again, so much of this is opaque. Again, as I wrote in the piece, it's not like these jobs are listed on Indeed and you know what the qualifications are that they're looking for. So like we're all kind of stabbing in the dark at all of this. We're all just kind of guessing at what these people are actually going to do. So look, I am here for the possibility that Tanner Glass is not the right guy. I just don't think it's for the reason that a lot of people were suggesting. So, and Nicole did have a question to this effect. So Nicole, I see your question. A lot of you got into the back and forth of the comments about it. But, if she does say at the end, is Tanner Glass's role really that big of an impact, or is it just the principle? Cleaning house in Hartford seems like it would be much more impactful to actually coaching player skill development rather than Tanner Glass's role, which I think is more just adjusting to an NHL lifestyle. Again, this is what I have mostly seen, but I imagine we will find out. And at some point, if things do not improve, I'm sure Tanner Glass will be out on his ear as well.
Yeah, there's also something to be said, quite frankly, and again, I'm like disgusted with myself for the amount of Tanner Glass defending I'm doing right now. There is something to be said for somebody who literally
you either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself defend Tanner Glass.
There is something to be said for a player, and Jed Ortmeyer fit this caveat as well, to be fair, for somebody who legitimately pulled themselves up by their bootstraps to get to the NHL level, like not an NHL talent. By no means is Tanner Glass an NHL talent. By no means was Jed Ortmeyer an NHL talent. There's something to be said for them, having careers in the NHL, longer careers in the NHL than they probably deserved.
For sticking.
Yeah. I don't love it. I don't think it's an unmitigated disaster. If the Rangers sign Tanner Glass to a contract to play in NHL hockey games, I'm right there with you to burn the entire fucking thing down. That's not what this is. And I do think we need to be a little bit more realistic when we're having these fights, if you will, that you're able to remove Tanner Glass, the player, from Tanner Glass, who was asked to be in this role. And I was going to bring up Gretzky, which you did. There is no better, like, hey, it doesn't necessarily translate into exactly what you think it is than the greatest player of all time by the widest of margins being a coach, a one and done coach that was just not, impactful in any way.
In that sense, and again, I'm talking about coaching now and not director of player development roles. I think there is something to be said for those kinds of mid-level players being better coaches than guys who come by a ton of skill naturally. Because those guys who had those journeyman careers, who really had to work to stick in the NHL, who had to take the natural talent that they were blessed with and really had to work to maximize it in order to become a professional, have something to communicate about how to play the game, about how to approach it, about how to put something coherent together, then I would think a guy like Gretzky. I'm not saying Gretzky didn't work. I'm sure his work ethic was impeccable. But when it's like the guy was putting up 200 plus points as like a child, right? Like in a fraction of the game. Go look at his like junior stats. They're insane. How much can a guy like that it comes that naturally to, communicate it to others? When it just comes naturally to you, how easy is it to communicate it to other people? So I do think that the coaching part of it is pretty revealing. Again, I don't even know necessarily how applicable that is to this role, because again, as Nicole suggests, it does seem like a lot of that role is about adjusting to the NHL lifestyle, more about maximizing individual skill sets, which would seem to come to me as something that comes out of practice, that comes out of the way that the team that you are on is coached. So again, we will see, but it's I don't love it. I don't even like it. I don't think it's a great decision, but I do not think it is the end of the world, and I don't even know that it's all that impactful. So
yeah, I just don't know. I don't know why you don't start fresh. I have no idea why.
That's the bigger point.
You make the decision that you're like, forget
agreed.
Tanner Glass, put anyone's name in there. I don't care who the co-player, developer is. It doesn't matter to me. I don't need that like conjoined situation. It just doesn't make sense.
So many things have not gone well. It'd just be better to start over, but it is what it is.
I agree.
Another question from Nicole Vitale. Seeing the Montreal Tampa Bay Lightning and Colorado Minnesota series back-to-back on Sunday, showing polar opposite play styles, which do you prefer watching? Low-scoring, tight-checking with lots of physicality, or fast-paced, high-scoring, wide-open play? Prefer watching is an interesting way to phrase the question to me. The latter, like the Colorado-Minnesota game, like to have like a 9-6 game in a playoff game is insane to me. That was wildly entertaining hockey. And I think both of those games, if you're a fan of one of those teams, they're nerve-wracking in completely different ways. If you looked at that and just absolutely insane, Montreal won that game with 9 shots on goal.
On net.
If you ever needed evidence that team is now being run by the former general manager of the New York Rangers, winning a playoff game with 9 shots on goal is absolutely the best evidence that is the case. I think they're both entertaining to watch in their own. They're both interesting to watch in their own ways. I just associate the Montreal-Tampa style more with playoff hockey than I do that absolutely bananas game between Colorado and Minnesota. But man, speed, skill. I only feel bad in those situations because the only hockey I've played is inline, and I played as a goaltender. And when you see a game that ends up 9-6, it's like, dear God, the poor goaltenders.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer because they're both terrifying experiences. On one hand, it's you never know. Look, one of the most fun games ever after the fact was Game 6 to send the Rangers to the Stanley Cup Final, which was the Dominic Moore 1-0 win over Montreal. And Henrik Lundqvist was a god in that game and made the quintessential save of his career, that like windmill drop the stick blocker save on a Dan Girardi deflection, I believe, on his own net.
Yes, correct.
That is I've never experienced like an out of body moment the way that I did in the Garden at that game of just the pop of the Dominic Moore goal was so worth it, and you don't get that in a 6-9 game. But on the flip side, every shot is just absolute agony. And from an enjoyability perspective, like if I'm just watching something, I want to watch the 9-6 game more than anything else. From a to experience game, I guess the 9-6 game, none of them are pleasurable for me. I've made this clear.
They're both
I've
playoff
made
games.
this joke numerous times. I don't enjoy playoff games. I have zero. They terrify me. They are horrible. My heart rate was 140 beats a minute as I watched the Rangers lose the draft lottery. I've actually gotten like Apple Watch warnings during playoff games of like, you need to go to the hospital because you're not moving and something is wrong with you, that your heart is beating this fast. So I have no, just no enjoyment one way or another. As an outside observer to a playoff game, I would rather watch a higher scoring game. There is an appreciation as a hockey fan to what a 1-0 game would be with spectacular goaltending. We saw a ton of it with Henrik Lundqvist. I get it. But yeah, I'd rather see the goals.
Chip, we've already addressed this a bit, but have you ever seen anything like that Toronto presser? Holy fuck balls.
I mean, just to go back to that, because we were sort of in the moment. When I was a young lad, I was a sports writer for a very small newspaper out of northern Connecticut. I'm going to save myself from getting in any trouble. I'm not going to give specific names. There were a couple of reporters, of an older guy and another guy who was fresh out of college like me. One of them wrote for a rival newspaper. One of them wrote for a daily like magazine thing, or maybe it was a weekly magazine thing. I'm not sure. That they legitimately thought they ran the town. And the football coach was hired. I don't fully remember why it was a big deal, but there was something to do with like he knew whatever it was a nepotism thing, and they didn't think he was the right hiring. And like these two guys, specifically the older guy, literally blasted this athletic director at the high school and was like, how do we not look at this as a betrayal for us, and you're betraying us? And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is not journalism, what you're doing right now. You're supposed to be, you're more than willing to have your opinions, but like, it's not about you type thing. And I was right next to the guy. It was very uncomfortable for me. Watching that press conference, I feel like Matt Sundin felt like me in that moment, where he's just watching this shit happen like a legend to the Montreal or to the Toronto Maple Leafs, obviously. And he's just not catching any of the fucking strays. But Steve Simmons literally, like, that's your answer? Look, I would tell you I feel bad for Toronto. The NHL rigged the lottery for them, so I have no reason to feel bad for them anymore. Congratulations on Gavin McKenna, you pieces of shit. Gary Bettman, it's on site once again. After you rigged the lottery for the Islanders, like, I don't understand what's happening here, but either way, I've never experienced something like that before. And again, to put me on the side of Steve Simmons, where I'm like, oh, hell yeah, get him. Like, that's wild to me. That whole situation is wild.
The only thing that I will add is, and again, I am offering this as explanation, not as excuse. Some of y'all out there wonder why Chris Drury doesn't do press conferences very often, if at all, right?
Do we want to get into this fight now? Because, like, I agree with you that that's why he doesn't want to do it, but too fucking bad. It's the job. I'm sorry.
Look, he should do it more frequently, but, like, I understand, especially if look, the bigger sin to all of that is, and we've talked about this before. You talked about your former career. I will talk a little about my former career. I did crisis communications and I ran political campaigns for a while. So again, I have been on personally, and my candidate has been on the receiving end of hostile questions from the media before. And to a certain extent, you just have to do it. Now, it's also the case that you do try to limit some of those interactions when you can. Like, you want it to be as managed as it possibly can be for your benefit. I thought the bigger sin of all of that is I can't control what a Steve Simmons type reporter is going to do in that situation. What I can do is control the way that those questions were answered. And both of what I saw of that press conference, the Simmons question to Pelly and the question to Chayka about his experience in Arizona, the failure was somehow they were not prepared to answer those questions. That is mind-boggling to me. Pelly should have been prepared to say, well, I hear what you're saying. Let me tell you why I made this decision, why we think John is the right guy for this job. And then you give all of those reasons. That is a very easy pivot off of that. And for Chayka to not have a prepared answer about his only previous experience as an NHL general manager, which ended ignominiously, including having conducted a private combine for prospects, which is wholly illegal in the National Hockey League. He stumbled over that answer. I don't know how either of those guys came into that circumstance thinking that they just weren't going to get asked questions like that without having answers prepared.
Especially in Toronto.
Especially in Toronto, without having brought in some kind of a consultant to teach them, I tell people this all the time in my current line of work, which is if you're ever being interviewed, and I'm even talking about far less hostile style interviews. If you just do podcast interviews, occasionally you will get asked a question that you just don't have an answer to or don't know the answer to or don't have a good answer to. And rather than saying that, the thing to do is just say, Joe, that's a really interesting question. But what I think the more interesting question is, and then you just talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. My consultant friend of mine calls it the block and bridge. You block the question that's been asked to you and you bridge it into something that you want to talk about. It is incredible to me that neither of those guys were prepared to answer this question. So, again, I don't really want to get into it, but back to Drury just for a moment. I think he understands he's not very good at that. He's just not all that personable. He's not good in those situations. I think it is necessary for him to do it at least occasionally, which is where I will agree with the reporters who have been complaining about the lack of access there. He needs to do it more frequently than he's doing it. But if I were in his position and understood that that was not really in my skill set, I also would try to minimize the number of times that I'm doing it just for that reason alone. Or the better solution, I still think, would be to divide up the general manager and president of hockey operations roles and have one of those people be more media savvy so that they can go out and answer questions, and then Drury doesn't have to do it.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on this, because we don't have to harp on it anymore, you have a hard out in 5 minutes.
I don't anymore, so we can keep going and wrap this up.
The way Simmons asked the question aside, I'm not talking about that. The question was a fair question.
Yes, agreed.
So,
there's a much less dickish way for him to answer it.
It didn't need to be so absurdly offended by the question.
Right. Yeah, why'd you hire this fucking piece of shit here?
But it's a fair question. And, to the point that you were making, Eric, I had a mentor in the business who would always say to me, a defense attorney always knows the answer to the question they ask. Otherwise, they're not asking the question. And why would you not be prepared for what was going to be the only question? Why are you hiring this guy?
You knew it was going to get asked.
Yeah. Why are you hiring him? What is the vetting process? Make something up.
You had to hope. You had to hope it would come in a much less a pointed way than it came from Simmons, but you knew it was going to get asked.
You knew it was coming.
You
had to know it was coming. So that is just complete failing.
Bonkers. Mike and Jay has a question about Klepov as a prospect. I think we will get into more prospect stuff as we get closer to the draft. I just have to tell you, I know absolutely nothing about this prospect, so I'm in no position to be able to answer this question. So, Mike, we hear it. We're going to kick it for when we can have a little bit more of an informed who the Rangers might take in their 2 first-round picks.
I will tell you, since we're talking
yeah.
about the draft, I've spoken to somebody else now who says he would be very surprised if Caleb Malhotra was available at 5, but even if he were, if the Rangers do not take a defenseman for where they're sitting in the draft, they are doing it wrong.
There you go.
He says
There you go.
he might even take Verhoff and Reed over him. So, again, you're in the crapshoot portion of the draft here, so I'm still of the mind that it'll be interesting to see if Drury tries to play a little bit with what he has, but I don't see anyone moving up, and to your point, I don't see them trading down.
This is slightly nitpicking what you just said. I think crapshoot is a little unfair. Like, once you get beyond the first round, you really are getting into lottery tickets, right? You're getting into, you don't know if these guys are really ever going to make it as NHL players. I think from, 3 to 10, you're talking about guys who more likely than not, and of course, plenty of those examples exist for the Rangers where it's not.
Be very careful what evil you put out there.
I'm speaking broadly. More often than not, 2 or 3 through 10 are going to be guys who have NHL careers of some kind. It's not as much of a crapshoot as it is it's not obvious who you should take in that place that you're picking.
And that's what I mean when I say crapshoot in that instance. That there's not a firm.
I just wanted to unpack that it's not crapshoot in the sense of like they may. I mean, again, there's not a 0% chance that they flame out like Kravtsov or Elias Anderson did, but those sadly are very Rangers-oriented exceptions to what is generally true of the top 10 picks in the draft. But yeah, it's more likely than not, you're getting an NHL caliber player in the 5th overall slot. It's just a question of like, who do you think best fits you and what do you need? And the Rangers need forwards and they need defensemen. They need centers and they need defensemen. So it's a question of, do you go with one of those defensemen or do you, perhaps as people are implying to you, reach for a Caleb Malhotra? Got 2 more questions from Chip. First off, to answer a lingering question from last week, I have a rainfall shower head, so I stand directly under the water. Nobody wanted to know that, Chip. Thank you, though. While with the passing of John Sterling, who is on your Mount Rushmore of New York sports broadcasting? Play-by-play only. You can choose 4 only. And the options he gives you are John Sterling, Michael Kay, Marv Albert, Kenny Albert, Bob Papa, Mike Breen, Howie Rose, Gary Thorne, and Sam Rosen.
Is this a personal opinion?
This is your Mount Rushmore.
Sam Rosen, Mike Breen, believe it or not. If it's for me personally, Gary Thorne, and then Kenny Albert. I think Gary Thorne is some of the best play-by-play hockey I've ever gotten.
And baseball.
I'm not a baseball guy, so like there's no...
But man can do anything.
Sure, but I'm going to tell you this right now. Baseball is a fucking waste for him. It is not exciting or fast enough to bring out the best of any broadcaster.
Oh, I disagree with that. And I will give you a absolute pinpoint example. You can go on YouTube and you can find the Fox broadcasts of the 2001 World Series, games 4 and 5, the 2 games that the Yankees tied with home runs in the bottom of the 9th inning in consecutive nights. And you can find the Joe Buck calls. And I am somewhat of a Joe Buck defender. We can get into this a different time. But this was in an era of Joe Buck where he was far too understated. And that was just insane baseball. Absolutely insane baseball. You don't like baseball, so you can give your
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. That's why I asked. It's like a me thing. Baseball doesn't do it for me.
You have terrible tasted opinions. We're all well aware of this, but I'll just give it to you from this point. I will send you the Joe Buck call of Scott Brocious hitting the game-tying home run in Game 5, and I will send you Gary Thorne's call of it. Gary Thorne was doing it for MLB's own broadcast of it. It is absolutely fantastic. And
Gary Thorne's incredible.
Because Gary Thorne is incredible. And Gary Thorne makes that stuff fun. So I don't think he's wasted on baseball at all. I think he baseball broadcasting obviously is different than hockey broadcasting. I think the biggest sin that you can make in baseball broadcasting is over talking. I'm looking at you, Michael K. Like, I understand why Chip listed Michael K on here because you kind of have to. He is probably like all of those guys and then 50 feet of crap and then Michael K.
Can I piss off even more people?
Please.
Doc Emrick should be in that discussion.
Former New Jersey Devils broadcaster.
I think Doc Emrick is one of the gold standards. I don't know why he got so much shit. I thought he called an incredible game.
I agree. I think there's also always a national broadcast overexposure problem where it's just you hear the voice so constantly, and if you have negative experiences that you may associate with that voice, maybe that's part of the reason. But I agree with you overall.
Who's yours?
So some of this question is lost on me because, as people listening to this podcast know, I am not a native New Yorker. I do not live in the New York area. So like I have never heard Bob Papa. I've never heard Mike Breen. So I can't really rank them accurately. So I would say, again, to me personally, it's Sam Rosen, Gary Thorne, it's Kenny Albert, and John Sterling. Sterling.
And like,
go
ahead.
There was a period of time where I was just like, I couldn't do the hokum of John Sterling anymore. And then came back to love it again. And I really appreciated what he did. And he was a phenomenal broadcast talent. And what an incredible broadcasting career. And will be missed. And, a good transition in that booth. But it had gotten to the point, just to kind of emphasize what I've been saying before, there was a point in time where I would mute the television broadcast with Michael K, and I would sync up the radio broadcast through my phone with John Sterling because I would much rather listen to them than Michael K's verbal diarrhea.
I've never been a huge Michael K fan, but I'm not a baseball guy, so really it has nothing, it is nothing for me to reference. Again, it's a very nostalgic, like, I have distinct memories of listening to Kenny Albert on the radio in the car with my dad driving to Ranger games, or listening to the post-game show where he's there. I also think Kenny Albert is just incredible. Another one who
hardest
can do
working man in sports.
His call in the Jose Bautista home run is like some of the best work that you're going to get. And I agree with your point, by the way, about like there are moments in baseball that are exciting. There's not many of them in a game. It's just, and again, maybe this is me not liking baseball. So, or not that I don't like baseball, I just not into it that way. So I feel like for hockey, I have distinct memories of the ESPN, the song to lead into the broadcast, and just what you got from Gary Thorne in those playoff games, especially those Colorado-Detroit games, is just as good as it comes. And even
Absolutely
his calls
agree.
on the New York Rangers Stanley Cup, which was overshadowed obviously by Howie Rose and Sam Rosen.
And yep.
But he's the guy who does on a warm June night when they win the Stanley Cup, and some of his calls, it's just Leach open net score like that. I have distinct memories of those calls, and I just wish he was back. And he's doing Baltimore Orioles, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That was several years ago. He has,
okay.
Yeah, he was. I think this was around COVID when he stopped doing Orioles games. Although the one thing that I always found to be unfortunate is you never hear Gary Thorne's call of the Stefan Matteau overtime goal, and there's a reason for that. Of course, you hear Howie Rose's, which we all know, and Sam Rosen's you'll hear occasionally, especially if it's MSG that's rebroadcasting the game. But the reason you almost never hear Gary Thorne's is he said the curse is over after Matteau scored to send them to the finals, which, of course, the curse had nothing to do with not getting the Stanley Cup final. It had to do with not winning the cup. So he actually flubbed it in a really huge moment that I imagine a lot of people don't remember because they were probably freaking out at that point in time. But that is the primary reason that it doesn't get replayed, is because he completely flubbed it with what the curse represented. 2 last questions from Chip. The New York Rangers and Vancouver Canucks have both won playoff series more recently than the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm not saying it's the coach's fault, but John Cooper has been on the job there for 13 years. Is it time for a new voice in the room? We saw Kelly McCrimmon pull the trigger on Cassidy in Vegas because he wanted a new messenger for his players. Should Julien Brisebois do the same in Tampa? I'll just note that Brisebois has said Cooper's going to be in that position for a long time. So it does not seem that they're going to do that. I'll say two things. I think John Cooper is an absolute elite NHL head coach. And I am absolutely here for the downfall of him in the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, I also think this is a premature, and obviously Chip is doing this for a reason, to draw a discussion. I'd be really hard pressed to not be beside myself that I lost the game 7 in which I held the opposition to 9 shots on net. Sometimes the puck just doesn't go into the net. Sometimes it does for the other team, and that definitely can be frustrating. I don't know how you upgrade yourself from John Cooper.
Agreed. Yeah.
If John
It's
Cooper
like-
became available, you'd have to have a meeting about firing
Yeah.
Mike Sullivan to hire John Cooper.
Yes.
So,
And he is,
If
and
it-
Sullivan is one of the few coaches where I think it would be legitimate to come to the conclusion after having the meeting that you're going to stick with Sullivan.
that you're going to keep him.
But like
right.
outside of Sullivan, Bednar, anybody else? Like, is there anybody else that you would say that it wouldn't be reasonable to come to that conclusion that you should stick with the guy over Cooper if Cooper were available?
Yeah.
I don't know that there is.
There's probably not. So Tampa obviously is a very well-run organization and a very well-run, I was going to say program. They have their shit together. I don't think they're a team. And again, Chip, I know you're not being completely serious when you ask this question. I don't think they're a team or an organization that would make a shocking decision like that. It's just hard when you get to, it's kind of like Steve Kerr on the Golden State, where it's like when he wants to leave, he'll be leaving. Other than that, I don't really see that turning into anything else.
Last question from 84 Jorts. As you go through the letter grades for the team and staff, how close do you feel the Rangers are to being a competitive team? If you could magically improve players' grades, how many would you need to change before they're true contenders? So I don't want to give away, because we still have a lot of report cards to publish. But as I'm scrolling through the average grades here, I'm seeing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 among players, 9 C's. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 D's, and I think 3 F's. So I think you've got to upgrade, you got to get all the F's gone, and you've got to upgrade 2/3 of what is remaining in order for us to have a serious conversation about being contenders.
To be fair as well, though, those grades are based on the player's performance this past year. So if you get improvements from those players, that changes, obviously, and it becomes a little bit more of a difficult conversation. I just think that the Rangers are in a position, especially now where things stand after the draft lottery, where they're not getting that needle-moving player that you probably slot in right away. Now you roll back to the next problem the Rangers have, which is, okay, there's no immediate solution on the horizon for this year that doesn't come for free, right? So because you're not getting McKenna or Stenberg, you're now relying on either McDavid, Matthews, and this is another thing. We were going to talk about how Matthews, is not sure he wants to stay in Toronto. Does this change his opinion on things now that Gavin McKenna is coming? Brady Tkachuk certainly seems like he's not going anywhere in terms of the Ottawa Senators right now. Jason Robertson, I think, is a pipe dream of pipe dreams, quite frankly, where things stand.
It does
with Dallas.
sound like Dallas is moving in the direction of Friedman was talking about this, that they are going to move things in order to sign Robertson, which of course was the obvious answer to this all along. And like, oh, it might cost you Maverick Bourque. Maverick Bourque's a fine player. But yeah, you re-sign Jason Robertson. Of course you do.
Yeah, so like with the exception of those big ticket items occurring, there's no instigating event that puts the Rangers in a position where they're going to be wildly more competitive next year. They may be a playoff team next year. It's entirely possible that they can figure that out if JT Miller doesn't play hurt. And I just think that where my antenna's up right now, and I've had about an hour to react or to calm down from the Rangers getting the worst mathematical position they could have gotten in the draft lottery, is does this change how Chris Drury looks at Vincent Trocheck, how this looks at him trading Braden Schneider? Is he not going to try to accelerate the timeline maybe that he would have if they got Gavin McKenna or Stenberg? Is he going back to the retool over rebuild, but we all know it's really going to be a rebuild situation? I think he's going to toy with some options. It would surprise me if he didn't kick some tires, specifically with San Jose. Like if I'm San Jose, I actually might be wooed out of the second overall pick if I could get the Rangers' 5th overall pick and then some really nice assets on top of it, simply because they really don't need the forward help. They'll take one of the defensemen that's left there, and then maybe they get something for their trouble. I just don't know if the Rangers have anything that they're going to be particularly interested in. And the optics of trading a second overall pick, even if you're getting the 5th overall pick back, generally is not looked at favorably. So again, there's only 2 tier 1 players, and the Rangers don't have a shot at either of them where they're sitting. So I don't know why San Jose would give that up.
A lot we could talk about next week as more of this shakes out, but is worth reminding people that Schneider had been connected to San Jose earlier this season around the trade deadline. So crazier things could happen.
It's absolutely true.
That's it,
Eric. I think we can end it there.
Yeah.
We got
2 hours
out of this now. Yeah, 2 hours. Wow, good for you guys.
$1.56 here.
$1.56 for all of you. Blueshirtbanter.com, $85 a year. Get you all your ad-free access to the New York Rangers. You can read that article that Keegan was talking about. We have report cards coming up. I have my weekly column. There's tons of good things on there. Chip has a couple of my trade proposals suck. Chip has a couple of stories on McDavid, maybe one on Matthews. We'll see where this goes. So you can read all of that there. Blueshirt Banter, youtube.com/Blueshirt Banter, Facebook.com/Blueshirt Banter, X.com, /Blueshirt Banter, Blueshirtbanter.com/Blueshirt Banter. Please listen to us, subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a nice comment, 5 stars. We appreciate all of that. Outside of that, Eric, I have nothing else to say.
Nor do I.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for joining. We will see you next week. Bye for now.